The sun had barely risen over Fort Ridge military base, painting the sky with streaks of amber and gold, when Carter stepped out of the transport van. Her boots struck the concrete with a rhythmic click, each step deliberate and measured. She carried only a small duffel bag, her uniform impeccably neat, her posture straight as a soldier trained from a young age in discipline and resilience. Around her, the base hummed with early activity, recruits jogging laps, drill instructors barking commands, and the occasional clatter of equipment echoing across the grounds. To an outsider, it was a typical morning at a military base, but to those who knew the culture here, this was the kind of environment that forged legends or broke the unprepared. His gaze swept across the sprawling training fields and the towering buildings of Fort Ridge. She had read about the base, studied its history, and memorized the drills that would test every recruit's endurance, agility, and mental fortitude. But reading about it was one thing. Being here was entirely different. The air carried a mix of anxiety and expectation. Every footstep, every shout, and every whistle added tension to the morning rhythm. This was her first day, and she knew the eyes of the base would be on her immediately. Her entrance did not go unnoticed. A group of 5 senior soldiers leaned casually against a fence, arms crossed, smirking as they watched her approach. Reed, the tallest of the group, nudged Morales, who let out a low laugh. "Watch this rookie," Reed said, his voice dripping with amusement. "She probably doesn't even know how to tie her boots properly." Ever the skeptic shook his head and muttered, "Bet she won't last a week here, not with us around." Holt, who prided himself on intimidating new recruits, leaned forward and added, "I'll make sure she knows her place." Turner, quieter than the rest, simply observed, curiosity flickering behind his eyes. The 5 soldiers had built reputations on fear and dominance. New recruits often whispered their names in awe or in dread. However, seemed unfazed by their presence. She walked past them with her eyes focused straight ahead, each step deliberate, exuding an air of quiet confidence that unsettled the 5 more than any harsh word could. There was no arrogance in her stride, no need to draw attention. She simply existed in the moment, aware of her surroundings but unshaken by judgment. Inside the base, the drill instructors were already setting up for morning inspections. The whistle blew sharply, signaling recruits to line up. Joined the line, her uniform perfectly aligned, her posture erect. Around her, other recruits fidgeted nervously, adjusting helmets, tightening belts, and trying to appear composed under the watchful eyes of their superiors. The 5 senior soldiers moved along the perimeter, exchanging subtle glances and smirks, ready to make their first move. Despite being new, had learned early in life that the loudest voice in the room was not always the strongest. Her strength came from preparation, focus, and the ability to remain calm when chaos erupted. She had grown up in a small town, raised by her mother, who had instilled in her the values of perseverance and self-reliance. Athletics had been her sanctuary. Track, martial arts, and endurance training had honed her body, while chess and strategy games had sharpened her mind. Every lesson she had learned, every obstacle she had overcome, had led her to this moment. 5 soldiers decided to make their presence known. As adjusted her gloves, Morales stepped forward. "Hey, rookie," he called, loud enough for her to hear, though he wore a grin as if expecting laughter in return. "Don't get lost during the drill. Wouldn't want to embarrass yourself." The other 4 snickered in unison. Their confidence was palpable. They had done this to every recruit before, and their pattern had never failed. Most newcomers crumbled under the combination of intimidation and peer pressure. Didn't flinch. Her eyes lifted, meeting Morales' gaze calmly without a hint of fear or anger. She said nothing, letting her silence speak volumes. It wasn't defiance, it was quiet certainty. In that brief moment, the air around her shifted subtly. Turner, watching from the side, frowned slightly, sensing that this was not the usual reaction from a first-day recruit. The other soldiers laughed, trying to mask a growing sense of unease. The morning moved forward, the drills began and remained composed. While other recruits fumbled with equipment or whispered among themselves, she focused on the basics: posture, breathing, and anticipating what was coming next. She had been trained to see opportunity in challenge and to use every ounce of energy strategically. The 5 soldiers observed her closely, their amusement mixed with skepticism. They were waiting for her to make a mistake, but no matter how long they waited, s calm, methodical approach remained unbroken. As the sun climbed higher, shadows stretched across the base, and the tension grew. The instructors called out commands, and recruits moved through drills designed to test both physical strength and mental resilience. Movements were precise. Every stretch, lift, and step carried an efficiency that caught the eye of even the most experienced instructors. While some recruits stumbled under pressure, she adapted smoothly, correcting mistakes instantly, never allowing frustration or self-doubt to cloud her focus. By mid-morning, whispers began to spread among the recruits. "Who's the new girl?" one asked. "She's already keeping pace with some of the veterans," another replied. Even among her peers, silent confidence began to earn respect, but the 5 soldiers remained determined. They had underestimated few, and's calm demeanor only fueled their desire to test her limits. As the first drills ended, Reed muttered under his breath, "This will be fun. Let's see how long she lasts when it counts." Simply tightened her gloves and adjusted her stance, fully aware that the true test was yet to come. Whatever intimidation the 5 soldiers intended, she was ready. Each step she had taken, each hour she had trained had led her to this moment. Fort Ridge would soon discover that Carter was not just another recruit. She was a force to be reckoned with. And so, as the morning sun climbed fully into the sky, the stage was set. Stood among the recruits, quiet, focused, and unshaken, while 5 soldiers plotted to test her. Little did they know, their attempts at intimidation were about to backfire spectacularly. In moments, the course would begin, and's preparation, resilience, and calm determination would turn the doubts of the 5 soldiers into awe and respect. Carter had never been a stranger to challenge. Long before she stepped onto Fort Ridge military base, she had spent her life navigating obstacles far beyond those faced by most of her peers. Born in a small, unassuming town, she had been raised by a single mother who worked tirelessly to make ends meet. From the moment could walk, she had been taught the value of discipline, perseverance, and personal responsibility. Her mother had a quiet strength, one that left an impression on. Challenges were not to be feared, they were to be met head-on, with focus, preparation, and resilience. School had been no refuge from struggle. Bullies had often targeted her, dismissing her small frame and quiet demeanor, but had quickly learned that physical size meant little compared to mental strength. She had trained herself in martial arts, discovering that focus and technique often outweighed brute force. While others shouted and intimidated, she observed, calculated, and executed moves with precision. By the time she reached high school, was not only skilled in self-defense but also an accomplished athlete, excelling in track, long-distance running, and cross-training. Her endurance was legendary among peers, and her tactical mindset allowed her to anticipate opponents' movements both on and off the track. Mental strength had been just as crucial as physical capability. Had developed a keen sense of strategy from an early age, honed through countless hours of chess, problem-solving games, and mental exercises her mother had encouraged. She learned that patience and observation often mattered more than speed or aggression. Every challenge presented an opportunity to analyze, adapt, and overcome. By the time she considered joining the military, she understood that preparation and composure could make the difference between failure and triumph. Despite her achievements had always been understated, she did not flaunt her skills or seek attention, and her humility often led others to underestimate her. People rarely saw the fire beneath her calm exterior. That fire was precisely what had carried her to this point, the doorstep of Fort Ridge. The base represented the culmination of years of preparation, strength, discipline, and mental fortitude ready to be tested on a larger, more intense scale. The moment she arrived at Fort Ridge, sensed the subtle tension in the air. The 5 senior soldiers had already taken note of her, Reed, Turner, Morales, and Holt, each accustomed to intimidation and dominance. They were skilled at reading new recruits and identifying weaknesses quickly. However, presented none of the signals they expected. No nervous fidgeting, no insecure glances, no hesitance. Her silence carried purpose, her movements exhibited precision, and her calm gaze unsettled them more than any bold declaration could. The 5 soldiers began their subtle campaign of intimidation almost immediately. Whispered comments, subtle smirks, and casual blocking of her path were their tools. "Don't get lost out there, rookie," Morales had called earlier. "Wouldn't want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone." The others had laughed, assuming this would provoke a reaction. However, had responded with nothing more than steady eye contact and a slight nod. She had learned long ago that reaction often fueled opposition. Calm observation, conversely, allowed control of the situation. Even her peers took note. While many recruits glanced nervously at the 5 soldiers, worried about their reputation and influence, observed quietly, taking mental notes about the personalities, patterns, and tendencies around her. She understood that intimidation often relied on predictability and fear, both of which could be neutralized with awareness and confidence. Each small encounter, the smirk, the comment, the attempt to block her path, was cataloged, processed, and filed as information. By the time the morning drills began, she was already prepared not just physically, but mentally to face the challenges ahead. This approach was rooted in discipline learned from years of training. Before joining the military, she had imposed a strict routine, waking before sunrise, running endurance circuits, strength training, mental exercises, and strategic drills. She knew that the mind was often the first to falter in high-pressure situations, and she had trained herself to remain composed under extreme stress. By the time she entered Fort Ridge, these habits were second nature. Calm breathing, precise movement, and controlled focus allowed her to remain a step ahead of both her peers and those attempting to intimidate her. Her preparation extended beyond physical and mental exercises. Had studied military manuals, memorized key strategies for endurance and obstacle courses, and watched countless recordings of drills. She knew the techniques that gave soldiers an edge in climbing walls, navigating mud trenches, and sprinting under fatigue. But more importantly, she knew how to maintain composure when exhaustion and pressure threatened to dominate. Discipline, she had learned, was not just about physical capability. It was about choosing control when chaos surrounded you. As the morning progressed, the 5 senior soldiers continued their attempts to unsettle her. Reed, frustrated by her silence, decided to test her patience. "Hey, Carter, think you can handle this?" he sneered, approaching her with a mocking swagger. Morales encircled nearby, ready to interject with a joke or a taunt. Holt crossed his arms, waiting for the moment to assert authority. Turner, more cautious, merely observed, nodding her calm demeanor with interest. His response was deliberate. She did not speak immediately. Instead, she shifted her stance slightly, inhaled deeply, and maintained eye contact. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and measured. "Everyone finishes their own race." The words were simple, yet carried a weight that surprised the 5 soldiers. It was not a challenge, it was a statement of fact. They had expected fear, hesitation, or defensiveness, but nothing they encountered so far had shaken her. The subtle shift in energy around did not go unnoticed by others. Recruits nearby exchanged whispers, sensing that something remarkable was unfolding. Observers, including some of the drill instructors, raised their eyebrows, intrigued by the quiet intensity radiating from this new recruit. While most recruits relied on vocal assertiveness to make an impression, his presence alone communicated competence, readiness, and confidence. She had become a focal point, though no one yet knew how extraordinary her abilities truly were. As the line of recruits prepared for the first major drill centered herself, she visualized each obstacle she would face: climbing ropes, mud trenches, balance beams, sprints, and lifts. Every muscle, every movement, every thought was aligned with execution. While others shifted nervously, she remained calm, a silent force ready to be unleashed. The 5 soldiers exchanged glances, realizing that their usual tactics of mockery might not suffice. This recruit was different. She had an aura of unshakable certainty, the kind of focus that could turn intimidation into irrelevance. By the time the whistle blew, signaling the start of the day's training exercises, was poised, calm, and ready. The 5 soldiers' confidence, once unwavering, had begun to falter just slightly. They could not yet measure her strength or skill, but the certainty in her eyes suggested they might soon find out. What they did not know, and what the rest of the base could only guess at, was that Carter was not simply prepared for the drills, she was prepared to dominate them. And when the moment came, the very same soldiers who sought to intimidate her would discover that her years of discipline, training, and mental fortitude made her a force unlike any they had encountered before. The morning sun hung high over Fort Ridge, casting long shadows across the training grounds, as recruits lined up for their first series of drills. Carter stood tall, her posture perfect, every muscle tuned and ready. Around her, whispers and stifled laughter floated between recruits, some curious, others skeptical, but all attentive to the quiet newcomer who seemed unshakable. Her calm presence drew subtle attention, a contrast to the jittery energy of first-day recruits and the overconfidence of some veterans. Yet she remained focused, eyes scanning the field, noting patterns, anticipating challenges, and measuring distances with a precision that was almost instinctive. The 5 soldiers, Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner, had been observing her since her arrival. Each was experienced in intimidation, having tested countless recruits with calculated psychological tactics: the smirk, the whispered threat, the blocking of a path at precisely the wrong moment. Their target was always reaction, fear, hesitation, or self-consciousness. That was how dominance was asserted here, and the 5 prided themselves on their ability to manipulate new arrivals into submission. But Carter had proven resistant to their usual methods. Her silence, her steady movements, and her unshakable focus had unsettled them in a way few recruits ever managed. As adjusted her gloves in preparation for the upcoming drill, Morales took the initiative. He stepped directly in her path, leaning casually on the railing nearby. "Hey, rookie," he said, his voice deliberately loud, "don't trip over that uniform of yours before the drill even starts." He smirked, expecting a flinch, a sharp retort, anything to confirm her fear. Reed chuckled behind him, smirked, and Holt leaned forward, ready to amplify the intimidation. Turner remained silent, watching his response closely. His gaze met Morales's, calm and unwavering. She did not flinch, she did not falter, and she did not offer excuses. Instead, she simply lifted her chin slightly, steadying her breath, and said in a measured tone, "Everyone finishes their own race." There was no arrogance, no challenge, just clarity and focus. It was a statement, not a provocation. The 5 soldiers blinked, momentarily thrown off by the lack of fear or reaction. They had expected trembling, hesitation, or at least a nervous laugh, but none came. Only the certainty in her eyes remained, quiet yet formidable. The field itself seemed to notice the shift. Other recruits glanced at with newfound interest, some whispering, "Did you see that?" Or "She doesn't even seem nervous." Even Sergeant Mason, standing on the sidelines, observed her with an eyebrow raised, noting the unusual composure she exuded. While the 5 soldiers were experienced in reading recruits, this reaction was unfamiliar and slightly unnerving. They had underestimated her, and underestimated the power of silent confidence. Trying to recover the advantage, stepped closer. "You think you're tough," he sneered. "This is Fort Ridge. We don't babysit rookies. You're going to learn quickly or you'll be humiliated." He let out a laugh, expecting the others to follow. Holt crossed his arms and nodded, adding, "Yeah, we'll see how long your little pep talk lasts once the real drills begin." Reed, the tallest and most imposing, towered over her, attempting to convey dominance through sheer size and presence. The air between them was taut with tension. Remained silent for a few moments, letting their words hang in the air. She did not step back or shift nervously. She simply positioned her feet firmly, adjusted her gloves, and exhaled slowly. Every detail, from the tilt of her head to the steady rhythm of her breathing, conveyed control. Her presence radiated discipline and strength, both physical and mental. She did not need to shout, threaten, or assert herself verbally. Her confidence alone was a challenge, and it unnerved the 5 soldiers more than any insult could. Morales attempted a different tactic. He leaned closer, lowering his voice into a threatening murmur. "I hope you know, rookie, some of us have been here longer than you've been alive. Don't think we won't make your first day miserable." The others watched with anticipation, expecting to falter. Yet she did not blink. She did not react. Instead, she measured her response carefully, understanding that dominance was often about timing, strategy, and perception. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but firm. "I didn't come here to compete with you. I came here to do my best. If that challenges you, that's on you." The words carried no malice, only a steadfast resolve that made the 5 soldiers exchange uneasy glances. They were used to fear, subservience, or at least some indication of vulnerability, but calm confidence disrupted their assumptions entirely. It was clear that she had trained not only her body but her mind, equipping herself with an unshakable mental armor that could withstand intimidation. Turner, the most observant of the 5, tilted his head slightly, recognizing something rare in her demeanor. "She's not reacting like anyone else would," he whispered, more to himself than to the group. This might be interesting." The other 4, still struggling to regain control of the situation, nodded slightly, realizing that their usual methods might fail here. They had underestimated the power of silence, discipline, and preparation. The tension was palpable as Sergeant Mason's whistle pierced the morning air, signaling that the drill would begin in minutes. The 5 soldiers, despite their previous confidence, now faced a situation they could not control. A recruit who refused to be intimidated, who met their presence with calm observation and quiet determination. Adjusted her stance one last time, visualizing the course and the obstacles ahead, aligning her mind and body for the challenge. As the recruits prepared to start, Morales muttered under his breath, "This will be easy to break, she'll fold once the drill starts." But even he wasn't entirely sure anymore. His composure had shifted the energy, and for the first time, he sensed that she might not be as easily defeated as he had assumed. The others exchanged hesitant glances, each one silently questioning whether their reputation for dominance would survive this encounter. His focus remained absolute. She did not react to the whispers, the taunts, or the subtle attempts to unnerve her. Instead, she centered herself, tuning out distractions and aligning her movements with the upcoming challenge. Every detail mattered: the placement of her feet, the tension in her muscles, the rhythm of her breathing. She had trained for this moment, and she knew that the first confrontation, while psychological, was merely a prelude to the physical and mental test ahead. When the whistle blew again, signaling the start of the drill, his calm resolve transformed into action. She was ready. The first confrontation had passed. She had stood her ground, deflected intimidation, and maintained composure. The 5 soldiers, still reeling from her unshakable focus, would soon learn that physical skill, mental strategy, and quiet confidence could overwhelm arrogance, bluster, and attempts at dominance. The stage was set. Carter was no longer just a new recruit. She was a force quietly preparing to demonstrate the strength and resilience that had defined her entire life. As she took her first steps toward the starting line, the 5 soldiers watched in stunned silence. They had expected fear, hesitation, or at least some nervous reaction, but found none. Calm, measured steps, her unwavering gaze, and her composed breathing were proof that she was ready, not only to complete the drills but to dominate them. And when the first obstacle was announced, no one could have predicted the extent to which she would exceed every expectation. The morning had already revealed something remarkable. Carter was not just another recruit. She was someone who had prepared, trained, and endured enough in her life to withstand intimidation without faltering. The first confrontation with the 5 soldiers had tested her mentally, and she had emerged unshaken. What awaited her next would challenge every ounce of her physical ability, but its background of discipline, resilience, and preparation ensured she was ready for every step of the way. The morning sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the sprawling fields of Fort Ridge Military Base. Recruits lined up in neat rows, muscles taut with anticipation, hearts hammering as they awaited the next phase of training. Sergeant Mason stepped forward, his authoritative presence cutting through the murmurs that rippled among the recruits. The whistle in his hand gleamed in the sunlight, a symbol of both challenge and consequence. Carter stood in the middle of the line, calm and focused, her uniform perfectly aligned, her posture unwavering. Every detail of her appearance and stance communicated readiness, a quiet strength that set her apart. "Attention!" Sergeant Mason barked, his voice sharp, commanding, carrying across the field. "Today's drill will test endurance, strength, agility, and mental discipline. You will complete the obstacle course with full gear, including sandbags, ropes, mud trenches, balance beams, and timed sprints. Any hesitation, any lapse in focus, and you will face consequences." He scanned the line, his gaze lingering on for a moment, as if assessing whether she was prepared for what lay ahead. The tension among the recruits intensified. Some whispered to one another, while others adjusted their equipment nervously. The 5 soldiers, Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner, exchanged knowing glances. Their smirks were back in place, their confidence renewed. "Let's see if Rookie Carter can survive this one," Reed muttered, flexing his arms and leaning slightly forward. Morales laughed, adding, "This will be entertaining. She might be calm, but she's going to learn that Fort Ridge doesn't forgive weakness." The others nodded in agreement, eager to see the first-year recruit challenged by what they considered a standard test. However, paid little attention to their whispers. She was not motivated by proving herself to others nor by defiance. Her focus remained inward, centered on preparation, technique, and visualization. She had trained for this exact scenario, not in theory but in countless practical sessions. Rope climbs, wall scaling, mud navigation, and timed sprints had all been drilled into her muscles and mined over years of disciplined practice. The 5 soldiers' words, intended to intimidate, merely served as background noise in the symphony of her concentration. As the sergeant continued his instructions, ran a mental checklist: rope strength, grip positioning, breathing control, packing strategy, and obstacle sequencing. Each movement had been visualized and rehearsed, every potential error anticipated. While other recruits shifted nervously or fumbled with their gear, she remained a model of efficiency. Her boots were laced perfectly, her gloves snug, her weight distributed evenly for optimal balance and mobility. She exuded a calm precision that contrasted sharply with the tension and chaos surrounding her. The 5 soldiers decided to escalate their intimidation tactics. Holt stepped close, leaning slightly into her personal space. "I hope you're ready, Rookie," he said with a mocking grin. "We've completed this course dozens of times. One wrong move and you'll be left in the dust." Reed chuckled, flexing his biceps in an exaggerated manner, and Morales exchanged quiet jokes about her size and presumed weakness, their confidence bordering on arrogance. Turner, still observing quietly, tilted his head, nodding the unusual serenity in his eyes. "She's unusual," he murmured. "Not like anyone I've seen before." Exhaled slowly, allowing their words to roll off her as if they were distant echoes. She knew the importance of psychological control in any high-stakes scenario. Fear, distraction, and ego could compromise even the strongest physical abilities. By remaining calm, she had already neutralized their attempt to unsettle her. Her focus was unwavering, her mind prepared for every twist, climb, and sprint. Each inhale and exhale synced with a mental rhythm, preparing her to execute flawlessly when the whistle blew. Sergeant Mason raised the whistle to his lips, signaling that the drill would begin in moments. The recruits adjusted their gear one last time, eyes flicking toward the obstacle course stretching out before them. A grueling test of strength, speed, and endurance that included high walls, mud trenches, rope climbs, and sprinting under full load. Eyes scanned the course carefully, noting every incline, turn, and obstacle. Her preparation had not been random. She had memorized the sequence, anticipated challenges, and planned her energy expenditure accordingly. Reed, sensing the anticipation, leaned toward Morales. "Watch her carefully," he whispered. "We know she's calm, but let's see if it holds when the drill starts." Morales nodded, but even he couldn't hide the slight uncertainty creeping into his expression. Holt crossed his arms, silently watching every movement while tapped his foot impatiently. Turner continued to observe, silently impressed by her composure and readiness. The tension in the air was palpable. Recruits fidgeted, tightening gloves and belts, while the instructors called out last-minute instructions. Sergeant Mason's voice rang clear and authoritative. "Remember, this course will test more than your strength. Focus, strategy, and composure are as important as speed. Complete the course with control or face failure." The words were both a warning and a challenge, emphasizing that preparation alone was not enough, execution mattered. Took a final deep breath, centering herself. Her body was poised, her mind sharp, and her determination unwavering. The 5 soldiers may have assumed her calm exterior was weakness or naivety, but they had misjudged her entirely. Each calculated movement, each subtle shift of weight, each measured breath was a testament to years of discipline and training. She had already won the psychological battle. Now, it was time to prove herself physically. As the whistle blew, signaling the start of the drill, surged forward. Her first steps were precise and powerful, propelling her ahead of several recruits who stumbled under pressure. She approached the first obstacle, a towering wall requiring both strength and technique. While others hesitated, executed a perfect vault, planting her feet and swinging with fluidity. The 5 soldiers watched, some in disbelief, as she navigated the challenge with both speed and control. It was clear that her preparation was more than theoretical. It translated seamlessly into execution. Morales muttered under his breath, "She's fast, too fast." Reed frowned, stepping forward instinctively, but Holt waved him off, equally surprised. And Turner exchanged brief glances, realizing that was not just keeping pace. She was setting a standard none of them expected. Each obstacle she faced, from rope climbs to balance beams, was approached with the same methodical precision. She conserved energy, optimized her movements, and maintained a rhythm that others struggled to match. The psychological advantage she had gained during the initial confrontation now extended to the physical realm. Recruits nearby slowed under pressure, fatigued by hesitation or poor packing, while moved steadily, confident in her abilities. The 5 soldiers, once certain of her failure, now faced an unexpected reality. This rookie was more than capable. She was a competitor who had trained, studied, and prepared to excel, not merely survive. Her calm demeanor, strategic thinking, and physical prowess combined into a force that none had anticipated. By the time the first major section of the drill ended, had already passed the majority of the obstacles with remarkable efficiency. The 5 soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing their assumptions had been shattered. She had not only resisted intimidation, but had demonstrated skill and composure far beyond what they expected from a newcomer. Observers, both recruits and instructors, began murmuring in quiet admiration. His presence had shifted the dynamics of the drill, inspiring respect, curiosity, and a touch of awe. As she prepared for the next phase of the course, mud trenches and sprinting under full gear, his mind remained focused, her breathing steady, her body alert. Every movement was calculated, every step measured, and every decision intentional. She knew the importance of packing and strategy, understanding that endurance, technique, and composure were more critical than brute force alone. The 5 soldiers, still reeling from her initial performance, could only watch, their earlier confidence replaced by cautious attention. The stage was set for Carter to prove that her discipline, preparation, and mental resilience were not theoretical, they were actionable. The drills ahead would challenge her physically and mentally, testing the limits of endurance, strength, and strategy. Yet she faced them with unwavering focus, undeterred by intimidation, observation, or expectation. The morning's events had already revealed one truth: was not simply a recruit at Fort Ridge. She was a force quietly asserting her presence, ready to dominate the drills and rewrite every assumption about her capabilities. The recruits stood in formation, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. The first part of the morning had passed, and the upcoming drill promised to be even more grueling. Carter stood poised, adjusting her gloves and tightening the straps of her boots. Her calm demeanor remained unshaken, every breath deliberate, every movement purposeful. Around her, other recruits fidgeted, nervously whispering last-minute strategies or trying to calm racing hearts. Yet's mind remained focused on one thing: execution. She knew that preparation and composure were far more effective than intimidation, and she had spent a lifetime mastering both. The five soldiers, Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner, had regrouped after observing her initial performance. Their amusement had faded into cautious curiosity, replaced by a challenge to regain control over the situation. Reed, the informal leader of the group, stepped forward with a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Rookie," he said, loud enough for everyone around to hear, "hope you're ready. This part of the drill will separate the weak from the strong, and we all know who's on top here." His words carried the weight of intended intimidation, but steady gaze did not waver. Morales, not wanting to be outdone, leaned closer, lowering his voice into a mock whisper meant only for her ears. "You think you can handle this? We've done this dozens of times. You're going to learn quickly that Fort Ridge doesn't play favorites." His smirk widened, but there was an edge of uncertainty behind it, and Holt circled, as if preparing to physically intervene if necessary, their eyes locked on her every subtle motion. Turner, the quietest of the group, simply watched, observing the calm precision in its movements and trying to anticipate her reaction. Inhaled slowly, letting the five soldiers' words and posturing roll off her like water. She did not flinch, she did not mutter a response, and she did not retreat. Her calm, deliberate presence contrasted sharply with the energy around her, causing even some of the observers to pause. In a measured tone, she finally spoke. "Everyone finishes their own race." The words were simple, almost understated, yet they carried a quiet authority that unsettled the five soldiers more than any shouted threat could. The statement, though brief, shifted the atmosphere. Whispers rippled among nearby recruits, some pausing mid-motion to look at her, astonished by her poise. Sergeant Mason's eyes flicked toward her, his eyebrows rising in acknowledgement of the quiet confidence she exuded. The five soldiers, used to asserting dominance through intimidation, now found themselves on unfamiliar ground. Their confidence had relied on reaction and fear, and for the first time, his presence deflected it completely. Reed clenched his jaw, masking frustration with a grin. "We'll see how long your pep talk lasts when the drill actually starts," he muttered under his breath. Morales laughed nervously, trying to regain the upper hand. Holt leaned in, gesturing toward the starting line, as if reminding her that the real test was imminent. Shifted his weight, eyes narrowing slightly, while Turner merely tilted his head, silently nodding her unwavering focus. All five had misjudged her resolve, and the realization lingered, creating a tension far heavier than any previous intimidation attempt. Meanwhile, allowed herself a brief mental visualization. She imagined the obstacles ahead: towering walls, mud trenches, balance beams, rope climbs, and sprints under full gear. Every challenge had been rehearsed in her mind, every mistake anticipated, and every possible outcome mapped. Her body, honed through years of disciplined training, felt alive and ready. Her muscles were warm and supple, her core was centered, her focus absolute. The intimidation tactics of the five soldiers were no longer relevant. They were simply background noise in the theater of her preparation. The five soldiers tried one final tactic. Morales stepped into her peripheral vision, lowering his voice to a taunting whisper. "We'll see if you can even make it halfway before you collapse." Holton chuckled, attempting to amplify the threat through subtle physical presence. Reed straightened, towering over her, projecting an imposing figure. The others watched closely, expecting to flinch or stumble, but she remained unshaken, a pillar of calm in a storm of contrived intimidation. Took a deep breath, centering herself further. She allowed her body to relax while keeping her muscles engaged, preparing for the sudden explosion of motion the drill would demand. Her mind ran through contingencies, recalling every lesson she had learned from years of training, athletics, and strategic thinking. She did not need to respond to the five soldiers. They had already revealed their underestimation of her abilities. Her silence and calm were her response, her preparation speaking louder than any words could. Around the training field, other recruits could sense the tension. Many had seen intimidation before. Few had witnessed a recruit neutralize it so completely without confrontation. Whispers spread, "She's calm, unbelievably calm." Another muttered, "She's not just prepared, she's ready for this." Presence had subtly shifted the morale of the recruits nearby, inspiring a mix of admiration, curiosity, and quiet awe. It was clear to all that this drill was no longer merely a test of physical strength. It was a proving ground for focus, preparation, and mental endurance. Sergeant Mason raised his whistle again, signaling that the drill would begin in mere moments. The recruits adjusted their positions, gripping equipment, shifting their weight, and taking deep, steady breaths. His mind ran through the upcoming sequence of obstacles one final time. Rope climbs, wall vaults, mud trenches, balance beams, sprints. Each challenge was mapped out in her mind, every movement rehearsed with precision. Unlike others, she had no nervous energy to dissipate. Hers was concentrated, controlled, and ready to be unleashed. The 5 soldiers, once certain of her weakness, now watched with caution. Reed's smirk had faded slightly, replaced by a guarded expression. Morales shifted uncomfortably, while Holt exchanged brief, tense glances. Even Turner, always observant, could not hide the intrigue in his eyes. Had done what few recruits could. She had neutralized intimidation before it even began, establishing psychological dominance not through words or force, but through unwavering composure and silent confidence. Finally, the whistle sounded sharply, echoing across the field. The moment had arrived. His body surged into action with explosive energy and fluid precision. She stepped forward, launching herself toward the first obstacle with controlled power. Her mind and body moved in perfect harmony, every step calculated, every motion executed with flawless technique. The 5 soldiers' presence, meant to intimidate, now became irrelevant as she entered her zone, focused, prepared, and unstoppable. As approached the first climbing wall, she noticed the subtle reactions of the recruits and observers around her. Whispers of surprise and admiration rippled across the field. Her execution was flawless, foot placement perfect, grip secure, momentum controlled. The 5 soldiers, watching closely, felt a mix of frustration and awe. Their attempts to intimidate her had failed entirely. Carter was not only prepared, she was poised to dominate the drill in a way no one could have anticipated. Every obstacle ahead was a test of endurance and precision, but training had prepared her for this. The psychological victory she had achieved over the 5 soldiers allowed her to move with confidence, free of hesitation. While others struggled under pressure, or faltered due to nerves, she flowed seamlessly from one challenge to the next. Her focus, preparation, and mental resilience created an almost unstoppable momentum. By the time she completed the first segment of the drill, it was clear to everyone watching. Carter had already transformed the dynamics of the course. The 5 soldiers, previously confident in their intimidation, were forced to acknowledge her skill, composure, and quiet strength. For the first time, they saw that true dominance came not from bluster or physical intimidation, but from discipline, preparation, and unwavering self-confidence. The whistle echoed sharply across Fort Ridge, cutting through the tense morning air. Recruits surged forward like a wave, the sound of boots striking the ground in unison creating a rhythm of controlled chaos. Carter stepped into motion with an effortless grace that contrasted with the frenetic energy around her. Every movement was precise, every stride calculated. She had visualized this moment countless times, rehearsed every obstacle in her mind, and now it was time to execute flawlessly. This was the culmination of her years of training, mental preparation, and sheer determination. The first obstacle, a towering wall, loomed ahead. Other recruits hesitated, adjusting their grip or timing, some faltering under the weight of anticipation. Approached with measured steps, planting her hands firmly on the surface, swinging her leg with practiced precision. With a fluid motion, she vaulted over the wall, landing gracefully on the other side. A ripple of surprise passed through the nearby recruits. Even the 5 soldiers, Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner, momentarily paused, caught off guard by the speed and control she displayed. Reed's usual smirk faltered. "She's fast," he muttered, more to himself than to the others. Morales let out a low whistle, his brow furrowed, and Holt exchanged a look with Turner, silently acknowledging that this was no ordinary recruit. Calm had translated into execution. Her mental preparation had become physical dominance. Every muscle worked in harmony, every movement optimized. She moved through the course like a force that had anticipated every obstacle and every reaction of those around her. The next challenge was the mud trench, a test of endurance and composure. Other recruits slowed, struggling to maintain footing, slipping and cursing under their breath. Didn't hesitate. She leapt forward, her boots sinking slightly into the mud but maintaining perfect balance. She crawled, then sprang to her feet with remarkable speed, her movements almost effortless. The mud that would have slowed others seemed to become part of her rhythm, every step calculated, every motion fluid. Observers murmured in astonishment, noting that she not only maintained speed, but also preserved energy for the challenges ahead. As approached the rope climb, her upper body strength and technique came into play. Many recruits flailed, gripping the rope unevenly, struggling with coordination and exhaustion. Movements were precise. Her hands alternated in perfect rhythm, her legs engaged to push upward efficiently, conserving energy while gaining height swiftly. Within moments she reached the top, swung over the edge and landed with controlled grace. The 5 soldiers watched, stunned into silence. Their previous confidence had evaporated, replaced with astonishment. Had not only kept pace, but was outpacing almost every recruit on the field. Turner, the quiet observer, tilted his head, eyes narrowing in analytical curiosity. "She's not just fast, she's strategic," he murmured. "Everything she's doing is efficient. She's thinking ahead, conserving energy, planning her moves. This is impressive." Reed scowled, refusing to acknowledge it, while Morales muttered under his breath, clearly unsettled. Holt exchanged uneasy glances, silently realizing that their usual tactics, intimidation, mockery, and experience, had failed completely. His calm, prepared, and disciplined approach had shifted the dynamic of the drill entirely. The next challenge was a series of balance beams, narrow and unforgiving. Many recruits faltered, their steps hesitant, hands flailing to regain stability. Stepped onto the first beam with quiet confidence. Her core engaged, eyes fixed on the end, and every step measured and deliberate. She moved across with seamless precision, landing softly at the end and immediately preparing for the next beam. Each transition was smooth, her rhythm unbroken, and her focus unwavering. Around her, recruits watched, some inspired, others demoralized, as she moved with seemingly effortless mastery. 5 soldiers had tried to predict her weaknesses, to anticipate hesitation, but nothing materialized. Every obstacle she faced overcame. She didn't rush recklessly, nor did she hesitate. She moved with calculated speed and precision. Her training had prepared her for moments like this, where the mind and body had to work as one, balancing endurance, strength, and strategy. The psychological victory she had achieved over the 5 soldiers earlier now manifested physically. She was unstoppable. As approached the sprint section of the drill, fatigue began to affect other recruits. Some stumbled, others slowed, their energy spent on prior obstacles. However, maintained her rhythm, her legs pumping with steady power, her breathing controlled. Her endurance, honed over years of rigorous training, allowed her to maintain peak performance while others struggled to keep pace. The contrast between her calm, efficient motion and the frantic energy of others was stark. By the halfway point, had clearly separated herself from the majority of recruits. Her speed, technique, and composure had made her a standout performer, drawing the attention of instructors and onlookers alike. The 5 soldiers, previously confident in their ability to intimidate and dominate, now found themselves trailing behind her performance, their earlier smirks replaced by disbelief. She was no longer merely surviving the drill. She was controlling it, dictating its pace, and setting a standard none had anticipated. The remaining obstacles were designed to test every skill, climbing walls, crawling under low bars, maneuvering through mud pits and performing timed sprints with gear, approached each with the same calculated focus. Her upper body strength allowed her to pull through barriers effortlessly. Her lower body endurance propelled her over obstacles without wasted energy. Every motion was deliberate, and every decision executed with precision. She had internalized the course, transforming preparation into flawless execution. Morales let out a low laugh, more out of disbelief than amusement. "She's too good," he muttered. Reed clenched his jaw, frustration evident, while and Holt could only shake their heads in reluctant admiration. Turner, always observant, nodded slightly, recognizing that had demonstrated not just skill but mastery. Her combination of mental preparation, physical strength, and calm composure had transformed the drill from a routine test into a demonstration of excellence. By the time approached the final sprint, it was clear she was on track to finish ahead of everyone else. Her breathing remained steady, her muscles engaged, and her focus absolute. The obstacles behind her had been conquered efficiently, and the remaining distance allowed her to accelerate with controlled power. Spectators held their breath, watching as the quiet, composed recruit surged forward, turning every challenge into a showcase of discipline, training, and unwavering confidence. When crossed the finish line, completing the drill in a remarkable time, the field erupted in a mixture of awe, applause, and whispered admiration. She had dominated the course not through reckless speed or brute strength, but through preparation, focus, and composure. The 5 soldiers, standing together, could only stare, stunned by what they had witnessed. Their attempts at intimidation had failed utterly, and had turned the drill into a personal victory, demonstrating the power of discipline over bluster. Even Sergeant Mason, his expression stern but impressed, nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Performance was flawless, a testament to her preparation and resilience. Recruits and onlookers alike began to understand a simple truth. Dominance was not about aggression or intimidation. It was about preparation, focus, and mental and physical mastery. Carter had proven that today. Carter had finished the first section of the drill, but she was far from finished. While other recruits were breathing heavily, wiping sweat from their brows, or nursing minor injuries, focus remained absolute. Every movement, every breath, every thought was directed toward maintaining control, speed, and precision. Her body felt alive, a well-oiled machine responding perfectly to every demand the course presented. What had begun as a mental battle against intimidation had now evolved into a full demonstration of physical mastery and strategic execution. The remaining obstacles were some of the most grueling, a series of high walls, uneven balance beams, crawling through low tunnels filled with mud, and a final rope ascent that tested every ounce of upper body strength. Many recruits faltered, their energy spent on earlier obstacles, their confidence wavering under the mounting difficulty. However, moved as if each challenge were a rehearsal she had performed countless times. Her body anticipated the resistance, her mind mapped each movement, and her rhythm remained unbroken. Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner had followed her progress closely. Their earlier amusement had long since disappeared, replaced by disbelief and unease. Reed muttered, "She's unstoppable." Morales's face was pale, and Holt exchanged tense glances, and Turner, ever analytical, could not hide his admiration. They had assumed her calm exterior masked vulnerability, but what they witnessed was strength, skill, and mental resilience beyond their expectations. Quiet confidence had transformed into undeniable dominance. The next obstacle was a vertical wall, taller than most recruits could climb without effort. Approached with measured steps, assessing the optimal grip and foothold. She planted her hands with precision, swung her leg up, and hoisted herself smoothly. Each movement was fluid, powerful, and efficient, conserving energy while maximizing speed. Other recruits struggled, flailing with inefficient movements and slipping repeatedly. However, reached the top without hesitation, swinging over in a single, controlled motion. The observers, both recruits and soldiers, were astonished. Morales whispered under his breath, "I didn't think anyone could do it that fast." Reed clenched his fists, masking frustration, while Holt could only nod in disbelief. Turner remained silent but impressed, analyzing every detail of her technique. Performance had not only surpassed expectation, it had shattered assumptions about what a first-year recruit could accomplish. Her dominance was no longer in question. It was undeniable. The course continued with balance beams set precariously above a shallow trench. Many recruits faltered, arms flailing to regain equilibrium, nerves causing hesitation. Stepped onto the first beam with unwavering focus. Her core engaged, her gaze fixed, and her movements deliberate. She traversed each beam with seamless precision, landing softly and immediately preparing for the next challenge. Observers watched, captivated by the fluidity and efficiency of her performance. Her presence commanded attention without a word. Her skill spoke volumes. The 5 soldiers tried to maintain composure, but their attempts at psychological dominance had already failed. Every obstacle faced, she overcame with calculated confidence. She didn't rush recklessly, nor did she hesitate. She moved with strategic power, a combination of mental and physical mastery that few could match. Each jump, climb, and crawl reinforced her growing reputation among the recruits and observers. She was setting a standard that others could only hope to reach. Next came the mud crawl, a physically taxing section requiring recruits to move low and fast while keeping gear clean and maintaining speed. Many struggled, sinking into the mud or losing rhythm, their frustration evident in strained expressions and gritted teeth. Approached with calm determination. She lowered herself, moving efficiently through the muck, hands and elbows propelling her forward. Each movement was purposeful, every ounce of energy preserved for the final challenges. By the time she emerged, her momentum was unbroken, her focus undiminished. Reed muttered to Morales, she's not even tired. Morales shook his head, incredulous. Holton could barely believe their eyes, and Turner's analytical mind raced to understand the rare combination of endurance, precision, and mental fortitude displayed by. Their earlier confidence in intimidation had been completely undermined, had not only resisted their tactics but had transformed the drill into a showcase of her superiority. The final challenge was a rope ascent, long and physically exhausting, demanding grip strength, upper body endurance, and mental determination. Many recruits slowed or struggled, their arms trembling, energy spent. Her approach was methodical. She gripped the rope firmly, engaged her legs to assist with leverage, and began her climb. Her movements were rhythmic, precise, and efficient. Each pull propelled her upward with steady power, conserving energy while maximizing speed. Observers watched, captivated by the flawless execution of every motion. Reaching the top, swung over the final edge and landed softly on the platform, a picture of composure and strength. Around her, the 5 soldiers exchanged stunned glances. Their smirks and confident posturing had vanished, replaced by the rare acknowledgement that Carter was extraordinary. She had taken a drill designed to challenge every recruit and executed it with a mastery that few could comprehend. Her mental preparation, physical strength, and unwavering focus had culminated in an undeniable victory. Recruits nearby whispered in awe, "Did you see that? She didn't just complete it, she dominated it." Even Sergeant Mason allowed a brief nod of acknowledgement, impressed by the combination of discipline, strategy, and execution displayed by. Her presence had shifted the energy of the entire training ground. Admiration, respect, and a touch of awe rippled through the field. The 5 soldiers were silent for a moment, processing the unexpected reality. Their attempts to intimidate and dominate her had failed completely. Reed muttered, almost reluctantly, "She's better than any of us expected." Morales shook his head in disbelief. Holton could only stare, while Turner's analytical mind cataloged every detail for future reference. Had not only resisted their intimidation, she had outperformed them, setting a standard for excellence that was impossible to ignore. Despite her triumph, remained focused and composed. She did not celebrate or boast. Her victory was quiet, a reflection of the disciplined mindset that had carried her through every obstacle. She had dominated the drill, not for attention or recognition, but because preparation, focus, and resilience demanded it. Her mastery was not just physical, it was a testament to mental fortitude and strategic execution. As she stepped off the platform, the field erupted with a mix of applause, astonishment, and admiration. Recruits and observers alike recognized that they had witnessed something extraordinary. Carter had transformed from a newcomer into a figure of respect, her performance rewriting assumptions about what was possible for a first-year recruit. The 5 soldiers, who had entered the day with confidence in their ability to intimidate, were forced to acknowledge a hard truth. Discipline, training, and mental resilience made her a force they could neither undermine nor surpass easily. Her domination of the drill was complete. Each obstacle conquered with precision, each movement executed with flawless technique. Carter had established herself as a standout recruit. Her presence commanded attention, her performance inspired admiration, and her calm, calculated confidence left an indelible mark on everyone present. The 5 soldiers, once confident in their superiority, now watched in stunned silence, realizing that Carter had not just completed the drill, she had owned it. The training ground at Fort Ridge had fallen into a tense silence. Recruits, instructors, and even the 5 soldiers, Reed, Morales, Holt, and Turner, watched Carter as she stood at the finish line, calm, composed, and utterly unshaken. Her breathing was steady, her posture upright, and her eyes sharp, scanning the course as if already preparing for the next challenge. Though her body bore the faint sheen of exertion, every movement radiated control, discipline, and confidence. It was the kind of presence that demanded attention without the need for words. Whispers rippled across the field. "Did you see that? She completed it flawlessly. She didn't just finish, she dominated." Even the recruits who had been skeptical of her abilities now looked at her with awe. The 5 soldiers, previously so confident in their own abilities and intimidation tactics, were reduced to stunned silence. The arrogance and bravado that had marked their earlier interactions with her had been dismantled completely. His performance had not only exceeded expectations, it had shattered them. Sergeant Mason, standing apart from the crowd with his usual stern expression, finally stepped forward. His boots crunched against the dirt as he approached. For a moment the air was thick with anticipation. No one moved. All eyes were on the young recruit who had rewritten the rules of the drill. Mason's face softened slightly, his usual glare replaced by a rare hint of respect. "Carter," he said, voice steady but carrying the weight of acknowledgement, "that was exceptional. Your performance today demonstrated not just skill and strength, but discipline, focus, and resilience. You've set a new standard for this course." The field erupted into quiet murmurs of approval. Recruits glanced at one another, silently recognizing the significance of Mason's words. This wasn't merely about completing a drill. It was about mastering it, controlling it, and inspiring everyone around her through skill and composure. His victory was more than physical. It was psychological. She had turned intimidation into irrelevance, dominance into respect, and competition into demonstration of excellence. The 5 soldiers stood together, their expressions a mixture of disbelief, admiration, and reluctant acknowledgement. Reed was the first to speak, his voice low and begrudging. She's better than we thought." Morales shook his head, and Holt exchanged uneasy glances, while Turner's analytical mind cataloged every detail of her technique and strategy. Their earlier attempts to intimidate her had failed completely. Had done more than survive. They had underestimated her, and she had proven them wrong in the most undeniable way possible. Did not respond to the murmurs or the acknowledgement from Mason. She simply stood tall, breathing evenly, allowing the energy around her to settle. There was no need for words. Her performance had spoken volumes. Every movement, every calculated step, every display of focus and strength had made her victory indisputable. The recruits nearby began to adjust their own mindset, inspired by her example. Some straightened their posture, others wiped sweat from their brows and prepared themselves mentally, realizing that true strength came not just from speed or power, but from preparation, strategy, and composure under pressure. Sergeant Mason continued, addressing the entire group. "Let this be a lesson to everyone here. Intimidation and experience are not enough. Preparation, focus, and resilience will carry you further than arrogance ever can. Carter has demonstrated that today, and her performance should serve as a benchmark for all of you. His gaze swept over the recruits and then lingered on the 5 soldiers. They lowered their eyes, recognizing the truth in his words. Reed stepped forward, clearing his throat, a rare humility in his tone. "I've underestimated you, Carter," he admitted, his voice firm but respectful. Morales nodded, adding, "No one expected this. You've earned our respect." Holton echoed the sentiment quietly, and Turner, analytical as always, simply nodded with a subtle smile. The 5 soldiers had come into the day believing they held psychological and physical dominance, but had flipped that narrative entirely. She had turned intimidation into her advantage and emerged victorious. Victory wasn't just personal, it resonated with everyone who had witnessed it. Recruits whispered in admiration, some even clapping quietly for her achievement. Her performance had demonstrated the power of preparation, focus, and resilience. In that moment, became more than just a recruit. She became a symbol of possibility, proving that discipline and determination could overcome even the most calculated attempts at intimidation. As the crowd began to disperse, the 5 soldiers approached, their demeanor now one of respect rather than challenge. Reed extended a hand first, an unspoken acknowledgement of her dominance. "You've earned this," he said simply. Morales and the others nodded, each offering brief words of respect, shook their hands with a firm grip, her calm composure intact. There was no gloating, no arrogance, only the quiet confidence that had carried her through every obstacle that day. Sergeant Mason walked past, clapping his hands once. "That's enough talking," he said, stern but satisfied. "Everyone else take note. Today you witnessed excellence in action. Carter has set the standard. Learn from it, internalize it, and strive to reach that level yourselves." The recruits absorbed his words, some still awed, others motivated. His performance had transformed the mood of the training ground, turning what had been a routine drill into a lesson in discipline, resilience, and the power of focus. Even after the drill was officially over, whispers continued. Recruits recounted flawless climbs, precise jumps, and calculated maneuvers. "She didn't just finish the obstacles, she made them look easy," one recruit whispered to another. "No hesitation, no mistakes, just perfect execution." The impact of her performance would echo throughout Fort Ridge for weeks, inspiring both newcomers and veterans alike. Her dominance had been quiet, unassuming, and yet absolute, a demonstration that true power came from preparation and focus rather than aggression or intimidation. As the sun began to set over the training grounds, Carter walked off the course, her uniform slightly smeared with mud, her gloves worn from the rope climbs, but her composure unbroken. The 5 soldiers followed a few steps behind, no longer attempting to assert dominance, but silently acknowledging the extraordinary feat they had witnessed. This journey had begun with intimidation attempts, uncertainty, and skepticism, but it ended with victory, respect, and undeniable recognition. That day, Carter earned more than completion of a drill. She earned a reputation, the respect of her peers, and the acknowledgement of the instructors who recognized the rare combination of skill, discipline, and mental fortitude she displayed. Her calm demeanor, mental resilience, and flawless execution had transformed an ordinary obstacle course into a legend of excellence at Fort Ridge. The 5 soldiers, once confident in their ability to intimidate and dominate, had been humbled, forever aware that true strength is measured not by bluster or experience alone, but by preparation, focus, and execution. By the time the recruits returned to their barracks, the story of Carter's dominance had spread. Recruits spoke in hushed tones, new trainees sought advice, and even the most confident veterans had to adjust their assumptions. Had not only completed the drill, she had defined what excellence looked like, inspiring everyone who witnessed it. Her victory was quiet, composed, and undeniable, a testament to the power of preparation, discipline, and focus. As the evening shadows lengthened, sat alone for a brief moment, reflecting on the day. The challenges had been grueling, the intimidation real and the expectations high. Yet she had faced every obstacle with determination, precision, and resilience. Every attempt at intimidation had been countered by calm focus, every obstacle conquered through strategy and skill. In that quiet moment, she understood that victory was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself the strength she had cultivated over a lifetime. And somewhere on the training ground, the 5 soldiers watched, humbled and impressed, knowing they had witnessed something extraordinary. Carter had rewritten the rules of the drill, transformed expectations, and earned a place in Fort Ridge's memory as a recruit who could not only withstand intimidation but dominate every challenge with grace, precision, and unshakable confidence.